Very good afternoon once again to everyone. How was lunch? Yeah? All right, that's good, that's good. So this particular session, this breakout session, is on animation and gaming in the ASEAN content. Yeah. So we're in the regional room. We'll be speaking on the bigger picture. Our speakers for this particular session will be Mr. Abdul Aziz. He is the Chief Content Officer of Animonsta Studios. Let's give him a big round of applause. We have Hasnul Hadi Samsudin. He is the Director of Creative Multimedia from MDEC. Let's give him a big round of applause. And moderating our session will be Chris Leong from SoftSpace. He was a speaker this morning as well. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will leave it to them.
Hi everyone. I'm Chris. I'm from SoftSpace. Previously, I was doing some entrepreneurial ecosystem development thing in Creator Fund. So I did a stint there, and we actually in Creator we funded some dark side. Yeah, I'm on the dark side, very dark side. Yeah, but what we did was we funded a couple of animation companies. So I'm well aware of certain problems that occurs in the animation and games ecosystem. So I'm glad that I have two very esteemed panelists here. One from the dark side, went to the good side and came back to the dark side, and one always on the good side. Yeah. So the animation and games industry is huge in Malaysia, and with the driving forces of technology like smartphones, like YouTube, and it's very different from the days where it is now. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I guess both of you can agree that it's very different ecosystem, different platform, different distribution models 10 years ago. I would like one of you to share the whole ecosystem. What do you think? And then maybe we can go to certain questions on the ecosystem. Anas, maybe you can share. When you first started, how different is it? Yeah.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. Some of you may know me from Animonsta Studios, but some of you may know me way back in the Upin Ipin days when I was working with Las Kopak. I won't be telling you guys what happened really, because that's all internal drama. But suffice to say that we decided to leave, all 7 of us, to set up Animonsta Studios. So that was 5 years ago. Yeah, exactly 5 years ago. And back then, when we worked in the animation industry with setting up Upin Ipin, to be honest, when we first set it up, we met with Hasnul quite often when he was working in MDEC. And at that time, a lot of people didn't believe in local animation content. People said, why don't you just take any services from outside companies that are going to pay a lot of money to make animation. You don't have to worry about the IP rights and everything like that. So, but at that time, we were very, very bullish. We wanted to make our own animation film, and which was Gang Penggembaraan Bermula at that time, and the spin-off Upin Ipin series. But at that time, we weren't really looking into IP business as a whole. We were just thinking, oh, okay, we're just a bunch of kids and we wanted to make an animation movie. And at that time, when it came out, Upin Ipin was a big hit, alhamdulillah, and with the movie doing very well. Suddenly, everyone was was surprised that local animation content could work, could sell really, really well, and people were pirating it like mad, which is one of the things that we were talking about later. But basically, it opened up everyone's eyes about IP business as a whole, not just in anything else like music, whatever, but also in animation content. That content for kids could actually be a sustainable market for us. So it was very exciting at that time because everyone was still figuring out. Licensees were coming to us and say, hey, can we do business with you? Can we make a T-shirt and stuff like that? People were telling us there's people pirating Upin Ipin T-shirts. We told the Maipo guys, hey, there's people pirating Upin Ipin T-shirts. And then at the time, those people, they were saying, they're doing what? Because if you can remember 5 years ago, the only thing people pirated in Malaysia were Siti Nurhaliza CDs, movies, KRU films and stuff like that. Nobody pirated wearable clothes and stuff. They were pirating like bed sheets lah, tilam lah, so many things. So it was really funny to see how things were different back then. And now we're all so okay. I can see Bobo Boy pirated balloon somewhere out in Pasar Malam and stuff like that. So the game has changed a lot in the last 5 years. Now people know that you can make a business out of animation. People know that rather than some of the licensees, some of the companies that actually do all this printing, they know that they don't have to pirate it. They can just go up to us, get official legal license, and then they can make business together. So in that sense, people now believe in local content, and now people are talking about how does Malaysia create a local content that can actually travel to the ASEAN market? How do we make our product travel to the global industry? It's no longer to the point that people are saying, how can we bring in external companies? How do we bring in foreign companies to set up in Malaysia and make animation? No, people are not talking about that now. People are talking about how do we, create the next big companies that can create winning animation content and games and stuff like that. So it's a really, really exciting time. You can see there's a lot of more animation companies out there right now, and everyone's trying to make something for themselves. So it's a bit competitive now, but it's good because it keeps us on our toes. And at the end of the day, the audiences, the kids, they will be benefiting from this, because at the end of the day, it's all for the kids.
Maybe I'll just explain. Yeah, Hasnul, I just want to share. I asked him to start first, but Hasnul is an awesome person because he's an MDEC veteran. He started in MDEC. He created a lot of good programs that helped the animation industry. And at one point in time, he decided to go join the light side. Join the light, yes. He sees the light, he went and joined Rhythm and Hues, which created The Life of Pi. And he had short stint in Sony. And after that, he decided to come back to MDEC to help to serve the country and help the ecosystem. So I wanted you to share your thoughts about when you were first started in MDEC, what do you see? And when you go to the industry, what do you feel when you're in the industry and now you're back? What new things you want to do from this experience?
Thanks, Chris. Let me just rewind back. When did you guys launch, gang? Do you remember what? 2009. So that was about 7 years ago. 7 years ago. So that's when we've always talked about the creative multimedia industry since then. I was part of that. I was actually staff number 9 of MDC at that time. So I was 22 years old, out of college, staff number 9, started in MSc, blah, blah, blah. But throughout my career, I always loved the creative and the digital content side. So that's why when Datuk Kamel, who's now the head of FINAS, actually started the creative multimedia division, I joined that as part of what I wanted to do, and he allowed me to do that. But even at that time, and going back to the question that Chris talked about, ecosystem development, MDEC at that time was already cognizant. They already knew that to build a proper ecosystem there, you needed 5 things. You need talent, you needed the infrastructure, you needed the funding, you needed the IPs, and also you needed the market access. So at that time already, we knew that we needed that. But at the same time, it was still very nascent. It was still very new. So even for the government, for us to look at it as a business, we were still trying to understand how do we best facilitate companies and projects like Bobo Boy and Upin Ipin at that time. So from here, I think what's great is that journey, I think, has probably taken over 10 years or so. We've come to a point where we've reached a tipping point. We've reached where we have companies who have the experience, who have the knowledge, who have the skills, who have also the even reach right now, the confidence to go out. And what else can we do as an organization within the government to actually assist them to propel themselves further? So in this case, as we grew in MDEC, even the funding structure for content was also different. When we started out, we saw, okay, how do we get our companies to participate in the global market? So one of the things that came back to us is that if they wanted to be part of the global ecosystem, could they do co-productions? So that's when we started out. We said, okay, you know what, we launched this thing called the MSc Animation and Creative Content Center, where the government allocated about 150 million, where 75 million was for us to build infrastructure and also do programs in terms of creating talent and programs for these companies and in terms of market access. But 75 million was actually set aside for companies to do co-productions. And this is where we learned something very important. when our companies were there outside in the ecosystem and in the market, they had sort of some skill already, but one of the things that they lack is they lack the experience and also the size of the company to make positive, I would say, whenever a negotiation is done, that they could actually get more. So usually what will happen in the co-production is, because they're new in the industry, is that they actually get the shorter end of the stick. So the government came in, funded the co-productions, but usually what will happen is that for that amount, they only get the rights for Southeast Asia or Malaysia, while their partner, maybe from the overseas side, will probably get Europe, or where more lucrative in terms of their business when they get back the money, right? So in this case, government itself also learned, because when we've looked at even funding for now, we've realized that, hey, maybe because we asked back the companies, hey guys, your co-production funding, you're supposed to pay back the government whatever that you've actually gained. But why is it so small? And then only we realized that at that time, a lot of our companies may have the skills, but they didn't have the stature. And now they do have the stature. They're able to negotiate better. So we learned from that. We say, okay, you know what? Maybe this at that time that was good enough for us at that time. But now it's a lot different. So even our funding structure for IP development is changing, because even now we're hoping that private sector actually comes in to actually assist us in, and that's just funding side of it, yeah, to assist us in growing the new content. So we see the likes of Media Prima now, we see the likes of Astro actually co-investing into a content or IP that's created by our local producers. And then the government says, you know what, our local producers don't have the money or the infrastructure to go against Media Prima or go against Astro, but Astro and Media Prima likes it. So therefore, the government says, why don't we help you to own a bit of that IP, so that at least you can grow together with Media Prima, with Astro, in terms of growing your IP. And this will be sort of the mantra that will be taking going forward in terms of helping companies growing their IP. I think maybe if you've heard that we're also having the pitching center that's coming out soon. And what the government has decided is that there are many content funding organizations in the government, be it MDEC, be it FINAS, be it MCMC. Now we're all under KKMM. They all decided, okay, you know what? Let's just put everything together, get you guys, because sometimes company A goes to MDEC, company A goes to MCMC. If they cannot get it MCC, they go to FINAS, and then if they get one from FINAS, then they go out, get another one for MDEC. So it's not really fair for the other players also. And this is how we're going to track the companies. We're going to track how they grow, and it's not just about funding their IP, but also funding their growth, looking at how they develop their company. So and I can talk more about this. It's going to be long, but in terms of ecosystem, I think even the government now is a bit more savvy in terms of how they want to assist. And we need not just the government to play the part, we need our companies to play the part, we need our distribution platforms and our broadcasters to play the part.
Thanks, Hasnul. Just one thing to check, because at the end of the day, when I was dealing with animation companies, one of the biggest problems they have is that the balance between creating local content, because you are selling to TV stations, Media Prima, and they want to have a localized content, and the challenge of bringing this IP global. So how do you find the balance, and how do you create content that can work for international markets? Upin Ipin is very popular in Indonesia, but you don't see it being very popular in other parts, maybe because the content, the jokes are very localized. So how do you as an ecosystem builder to look balance between, okay, how much should I fund for local needs and how much should I build for international needs? Your thoughts on that, Hasnul?
Actually, I'd rather Anas answer this question first, and then I'll chime in.
So yeah, your question is based on the whether how to balance. Right. I won't say we know per se how to balance it out, But one of the things that we learned when I was trying to sell Upin Ipin back then, it was very difficult to sell it to Disney. I remember I set meetings with Disney and Nickelodeon, and they didn't show up, and people just said that they weren't interested in Upin Ipin. They just didn't. It didn't make sense. That was back in 2008, 2007. I remember, because at that time we had Upin Ipin, the Ramadan episodes. So that definitely cannot work. Disney channels and channels like Nickelodeon and stuff, they want to go for a more secular approach. Not so much that they are anti-religion. They want to have it very neutral. It doesn't serve a certain market. They want to have a broader market. So definitely we couldn't sell Upin Ipin at that time. But back in season 3, the shift in the cartoon was more towards imagination. If you remember one of the early parts, the kids, Upin Ipin, they were imagining themselves as pirates. Still, Laksamana Upin Ipin and stuff like that. So it was still had a local touch to it. And that did really well. And then when the DVDs were out, the Disney person, I think her name was Lynette. No, Lynette called me. Yeah, Lynette called me. She said that, hey, I saw your DVD. Someone bought it in JB, and they to show it to the kids, and it looks really interesting because at the cover itself it's Upin Ipin and on a boat with crates and stuff, and it looks like a pirate adventure completely. It did not look like a Ramadan episode or whatsoever. And she said like, oh, yeah, well, can we see more about this? We're really interested. And then I said, okay, sure. And then we set a meeting, and then she saw more episodes from that, and we had an episode where the kids were playing naik basikal, and then the bicycles became like futuristic hover racing. I don't know what they were, but it was very futuristic because all in the imagination of the kids. And she said she loved it, and they completely bought the whole season, and then were asking for the next subsequent seasons. And at that time, we realized that it was not so much that the story was about Malay kids or in the kampong or whatever. It's so much more about global stories that any kid can relate to. So when we left and created Animonsta Studios, we knew that from the very beginning it had to be something that all kids could relate to. We can't do something like a Pendekar story or whatever, some very, very specific cultural story that kids in, I don't know, India may not be able to recognize, or kids in Europe, they don't care about Hang Tuah, for instance. They just want to see action. They just want to see jokes. So we made sure that the story was something that all kids could relate to. So at that time, we thought, oh, okay, superheroes, aliens, robots, stuff like that. That works. Kids love that. I watched stuff like that when I was a kid. I didn't care Ultraman was Japanese or the original Kamen Rider and stuff like that were Japanese. I didn't care. I was a kid. I enjoyed it. They had the cool moves, and I wanted to buy the merchandise. That was my perspective when I was a kid. So it should be able to replicate it in modern times. So we realized that in Malaysia, even in the global region, there weren't many kid superheroes. There were only adult superheroes. Every kid wanted to be Superman, Spider-Man, adults, but nobody wanted to be a child superhero because there weren't many. The only ones that were around were Teen Titans at that time, which is still teenagers. But we wanted to go for the children market. So that's why we went with Bobo Boy, a superhero kids fighting against aliens, which everyone can relate to. Everyone somehow know about aliens, and then there's some comedy elements in it. So that's how we balance it out. But at the same time, we didn't want to make a story about set in Europe, for instance, or a story about some bunch of Mat Saleh kids, because that wouldn't work, because we're not Mat Salehs. we're Malaysians. So at the end of the day, we need to have a story where it's from the heart. It's still about us. It's about kids, Malaysian kids, multiracial kids going to school. And then the school system is a lot like Malaysian system. So it's something that the local ASEAN scene can relate to. You always have to find, at the end of the day, a strong local base, because should your animation does not work outside, at the end of the day, you can still fall back to your local base. And that's very, very important. Just that you have to make it in the mind that it can be traveled to overseas. So even like in the dialogues, in the animation, we made sure that we didn't have too much of the cultural lingo, which was very, very hard to translate. For instance, in season 1, back then we weren't really smart in that one. So we had stuff like bertuah punya budak, the Tok Abah cakap to Bobo Boy. So I was like trying to find a way to translate that in English but make it funny. So I just went with cheeky one, aren't you? in that sense. So we reduce stuff like Assalamualaikum or very very cultural lingo stuff that or pepatah Melayu in the series. We try to reduce that so that's something we can translate overseas. Make it more slapstick humor, general humor, stuff that any kid can understand and can enjoy. So that's more on how our business strategy on how to balance it out.
I'll just ask one question. From your experience, you pitch to a lot of distributors or studios. I guess at one point in time they will give you suggestion. Okay, you should change the content, change the script. How do you stand firm into what you believe? And what's the process? What's the thought process about that when you say localized or universal? Yeah.
I say no, no. Well, basically, you think that a lot of distributors and broadcasters have figured out what works in kids' content. To be honest, I don't think they have a good idea as well. Nobody can figure out kids' content. And actually, you have just as much a fair chance to prove to them you know better. Because at the end of the day, this is the modern landscape now. You can create something, a short 2-3 minutes animation, games, whatever, release it online, release it on YouTube, test it out. You test it out, you get some numbers, and if you can get, let's say 20,000 views for your trailer, you show to the broadcaster, say, can you make it more? But we got to 20,000 views, it's pretty good. And this is the distribution. If you worked in with YouTube, you can even get the statistics of the age group, of the gender distribution and stuff like that. So all these things are very, very close to you to find out. You have all this information if you need to. So I don't think you can listen to what they suggest and discuss among yourselves whether or not that's something that can be very good in business-wise. But at the same time, you need to still be confident in the stories that you make. But there are some things that we changed. For instance, originally, Bobo Boy was supposed to fight aliens who are invading Earth for coffee beans. So we thought it would be funny because the aliens were always drinking coffee and they'd be, very hyper and always caffeinated. But then we had our Disney partner said that, the coffee is not very good because you're making a kids show, but you're promoting coffee. So no, it doesn't make sense. And even in some shows, any cup that a kid is holding, you have to denote that it's actually chocolate instead of coffee because they are very sensitive with kids drinking coffee. So you need to know this kind of sensitivity out there in the market, what kind of things that you can and cannot do. So even in mugs, if you look at some Disney cartoons or whatever, you always see the kids holding a mug and there'll be marshmallows on top to show that it's marshmallows and hot chocolate. So that is something that we decided, okay, that's a good idea. Why don't we just change it to chocolate? Kids love chocolate. Kids want to defend Earth, defend chocolate from aliens. So it makes sense. So that's some of the things that we implemented, and it turned out really, really well. And then we also had feedback from parents. We always listen to kids and parents and what are the things that they love. For instance, back in when we were pitching the show, we didn't have any episodes out, but the characters were ready. And as you know, that in animation, making a character can take about like a month just to design and character and model and stuff like that. But when we completed Yaya, the character Yaya, she was wearing a headscarf. So at that time we thought, okay, let's make it international. She's not wearing a hijab, she's wearing a scarf, so any kid around the world can see it and say, okay, that's no problem. But we had like some suggestions from mothers in Malaysia. They said that I understand that you want to make it more international by making a headscarf, and religiously speaking, Yaya is not at a certain age where she has to wear a hijab. But they said that when this comes out, it's going to be very, very influential to kids. So it's better that Yaya wears a full tudung, a full hijab, and give an impression that give an influential message to kids that if they want to be like Yaya, they will wear a full tudung as well. So it may seem like a very, very small request. And, we can just say, what does she know about business and stuff like that. But when we changed it, we thought that, this could work really well. This could actually be a very strong Muslimah figure in the local market. And when we did, everyone loved it. Everyone loved Yaya. To the point that Bobo Boy is the number one character in the series. The second character most popular is actually Yaya, not the other boy characters. So this was very, very interesting to the point that we realized that it's not so much about how easy it is for us to make the show travel out. and it's more about how do we get the audiences, the kids, the parents to love the show as much as we can. So at the end of the day, we actually had to make two versions of the show. We had Bobo Boy Malaysia, with all the text in Malay. We had Bobo Boy in English, so for Disney Channel. So same characters, but if there's the kebenaran saying at the back, is changed to justice or something like that. And we also had an international version, and where we had, with funding from MDEC that helped us, we actually replaced Yaya's character with another character. I think she was a brunette, I think, just for international sake. But at the same time, the animation was still there. We could just copy it, so the technology was there. So it was a very, very good way of learning how to learn from feedback from broadcasters and also parents to find out what it is that we want to follow and what it is that we want to actually keep for ourselves.
Comments on that, Hasnul?
Yeah, and thanks for highlighting that story about Coffee Bean and Coco. I was waiting for you to say that. That was one of the funny stories when we were working on this together. I was back in MDEC and I was trying to get them to pitch to Al Jazeera's children's channel at that time. And same thing came from Al Jazeera's children's channel. They said, hey, how can they be drinking coffee, their kids? Which brings me to the story that I want to tell, is that I was also involved with the creation of Saladin, the animated series, and that was also another interesting sort of project that went through many changes. Yeah, when it started out, it was actually a film project. So we had this Hollywood script writer actually write this whole script, about the whole life of Saladin from when he was born till his death, and sort of the major battles that he was in, and so it was meant to sort of stir up the whole Muslim sort of spirit and stuff. But then we created a trailer around one of the major scenes in that film of the script, and this was actually shown in Cannes. And we were lucky at that time. Suddenly we got a call from this very low voice. We want to speak to the people who are doing Saladin, and we want to see if we can work together on that. And we actually got the call from the general manager of Al Jazeera's children's channel, Mr. Mahmoud Buneb. And at that time it was my colleague Juhaida Jomin, who actually now runs Giggle Garage, which is another animation company out there doing their own IP and stuff. And she said, okay, we need, they want us to fly to Qatar next week and they'll pay for everything. So this is Qataris, right? They got so much money anyways. So next week, both myself and Juhaida, we were just, no experience at all in terms of negotiating, and they said, we want to be part of Saladin. What do we need to do? And this is their whole executive board there talking to us two guys who are, I was a manager then, and Juhaida was just a senior exec working on that project. And and you have this really old gentleman, very big voice, very big, Arabs, right? So it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And the next day only Datuk Kamil came, and he was part of the conversation, and that gave us a really good relationship. Started a relationship with Al Jazeera. Now, what had happened with the project is that they looked at the characters. We actually did some pre-production even before that time. We were doing characters. We had, based on only desktop research, right? These are things that we got from the internet. Now, the internet is a lot better than it was before in terms of getting more research done. But what had happened is now they're a children's channel, and they're Middle Eastern, and they're from Middle East, and they have very strong views on how the Middle East should be portrayed. Plus, at the same time, and this is where I think it's important for any content developer, is what you develop for your target audience or your broadcaster or your platform. You really need to understand your platforms very well. Then only you're able to actually hit and become relevant to that platform. So in this case, they're saying maybe we shouldn't do a film first. To hit the market, we should try to make it into a TV series first, so that we can create the story and build it up, and then later on, once you've built up sort of the fan base, you hit it with a film. Now, this is a great idea. I think this is what the guys in Bobo Boy are doing now. They were crazy enough to do a film first in Upin and Ipin with a gang, but that actually, that's actually, I always tell everybody, Upin Ipin is an anomaly. It would probably if we didn't have, I think everything at that time was very opportune. We had a government that wanted to promote animation. We had Arwah Dato Sri JJ, who at that time was Tan Sri JJ, was very much a proponent of animation. He was the one who put this whole MSc Animation Center together. He made sure we supported them, so they got what they what they needed. But in this sense, you really need to understand. So from JCC's perspective, they said that a TV series pula tu has to be 26 minutes long, because they don't have commercials. They don't have advertising on their channel, because it's a children's channel and it's all funded by the government. So we have to create a TV series that's 26 minutes. Kalau you go anywhere else, it's just 22 minutes for a half an hour show, because they want to put commercials in it and every stuff. So then also changed the way that we had to do our content. Plus they came in, they brought in their own script writers and all. But from the film and the TV series, what also happened is that we need to make it more internationally sensible, right? So that's why we also had characters we brought Saladin's character to a teenager. It's an adventure. And it also had other characters around it, like Nisa and Tariq and these, to actually gain the viewers, the target viewers that they were looking at, which is these young, impressionable. At that time, for them, is the Middle Eastern kids. For us, the general public. But that made it easier for us to sell it, I guess, internationally, because Saladin is not easy to sell, especially to the Western market. So we had to make it more, I guess, this is where the universally accepted sort of content. So that's why Saladin is what it is now. Yeah, you see the animated series as it was, and it was great enough that the content was so good it was nominated for an international Emmy. Back in the days when we were, I think that's before I left. That's right after I left that they want to get a nomination, an international Emmy. So what the important point that I'm trying to make is that although this whole experience story thing about Al Jazeera is that you really need to understand who you're selling to, that connection, that relevancy that you have, and when you create that IP, it's okay. For example, if you're selling to Disney, it's usually the crowd is maybe girlish in a way, tweens, but unless you go to Disney XD, which is all boys. That's why you see Marvel on it, you see all these boy sort of animation. But then if you're doing something like, for example, Ultraman in animation form, you cannot sell to Disney probably, you cannot sell to Disney, or maybe Disney XD, but if it's older, maybe the Ultraman can do a bit of killing or something like that, then you probably have to go to Animax or something like that. That's more the target crowd that you're looking for. So it's really important for you to understand who your target crowd is before you actually sell to that TV channel. If not, they will say, why are you coming to me with this? It doesn't work on my channel. So then they will just pangkah you forever lah, in a way. So you really need to understand who you're selling to. And the way to do that is to look at the channel and see what the content is on that channel.
Thanks, Hasnul. Just now Anas mentioned a lot about getting feedback from parents. I look at this as a form of validation. So how do you know whether the content or the games that you created works? What kind of ways do you validate whether it works? Do you believe in the Steve Jobs mantra where you don't believe in market research, or you do a lot of market research or validation to do that? And from Hasnul, maybe you can talk about the programs that MDEC is doing, the acceleration program. Do they have any validation metrics that they look into before they launch go to market? Something for you to share. But anyone wants to take this first?
How do we make sure that it
How do you
validate? Yeah. Okay. Well, first things first. Before you begin your IP, whether it's animation or games, I like to remind a lot of people, because a lot of people, even we forget that it's not an animation business, it's an IP business. So it doesn't matter if it's 2D animation, 3D animation, educational, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still an IP business, and you need to understand what is your target market, like Hasnul said. But the way to do that is, I do believe in market research to a certain extent, but we usually look at what are the shows that kids are watching. So whenever we're outside in public, there's a lot of kids, we're looking at what they're wearing. If it's a Boboy t-shirt, yes. Oh no, it's pirated. No. But we're looking at, okay, they're wearing Marvel stuff, so we can understand. The boys are wearing this kind of action kind of t-shirts. The girls, they're wearing something like My Little Pony or Winx Club or whatever. So we're starting to look into that. We don't necessarily make a focus group. What you guys are watching and stuff like that. We just do normal research. You can just ask your friends, kids, or whatever. What shows are you watching? What are the awesome stuff? Or do you like Ben 10? I thought Ben 10 is still relevant. Kids don't care about Ben 10 now. I like asking, is Ben 10 still awesome? It's nah, it was boring when he grew up. So a lot of kids actually said that. So I say, oh, okay. But everyone in the industry is saying we need to make the next Ben 10. But kids don't care about Ben 10 now. So it's sort of like you have to understand the trends in for kids right now, and a lot of people are saying that we should do more superhero shows, but at the same time there's too many superhero shows, to the point that when Guardians of the Galaxies came out, it was surprising that it was a commercial success, because it was not a bunch of superheroes, but it's still from Marvel. Even Marvel was surprised that it did so well. And at the end of the day, a lot of people, some of us in Animonsta, we realized that at the end of the day, it's still just entertainment. If you can entertain people in any form, you're going to get that market. So how we validate our success of an IP is usually we just look at how much people are talking about it. It's very easy. You open Google, you search your own product, you search your own IP, look at the search results. You can even go for Google Trends. You look at Google Trends and you will see a graph and how much people are researching it. That's how you validate it. But if you're brave, then you can you search trends, see the graph for your product, and then let's say put Upi Ipin. Then you'll see, oh no. But then even we do this on a day-to-day basis, because we're doing Ball Boy. Definitely our competition is Upin Ipin. So we're like, okay, at this point Ball Boy is being searched more because it's a new episode. But then Upin Ipin is going up. Okay, we got to make a better episode next time. So this is some of the ways that we validate. We even go like, okay, let's try Google Trend Naruto. Then it goes really high. Okay, so we know that we can't fight with some of the bigger properties, but it's still good to look at that and see how far we are and where we stand in the market. You can just look into your YouTube and see how many views. Look at all the Google analytics. So in that sense, you don't really need like a consultancy or someone outside to research how well your IP is worth. You can do it yourself. It's very, very easy nowadays, what with Google's tools and stuff. So I guess that's some of the things. But at the end of the day, I think it's still, you look at the internet data, and at the same time you just ask kids, show them the trailer, do they like it? If they get bored, change it and whatever you can.
Anything to add, Hasnul?
I think this is a great age that we can try, and then what is it? Fail fast, fail cheap, right? That's the mantra, right? And having something like YouTube allows you to do that. I think Upin Ipin was a great example of how they used YouTube at that time, right? Because YouTube was still really new, and even us using online streaming content, nobody really thought about anything much about YouTube at that time. But they used Upin and Ipin to test out the market, to see how to see which characters actually worked, right, at that time. So this is now sort of where we're also looking into. When I talk about the pitching center and then the financing under pitching center, where everybody is always talking about funding, but the government is a bit more savvy again, as I said. Right now, we're looking at funding more development rather than production, right? Because production, hopefully, you can get your private funders to hopefully come in also. So we fund up, I think last time up to 40%. But in terms of development, where we feel that, I think the government feels, not I, but the government feels that it's high risk, right? So that's why you're creating characters, you're creating, and this is usually not within the resources that you have within your company. You know, it's extra resources. You need to find script writers. You need to make sure that you have, concept artists and people who can build the pitch deck for you to find a private funder, right? So we've seen successes in this. We've been doing it for the past 2 years. And sorry to say, I mean, just to let you know that I just joined the company back in December, so I'm just recollecting whatever I can remember, and I'm asking for my colleagues. So I hope I'm right. Yeah. If I'm wrong, then hopefully I can. If you guys still want a question, I can always revert to my colleagues who've been in the company for a long time. But essentially, we've seen those who have developed their content pitch this to, for example, Media Prima or Astro, or even to external broadcasters or distributors, and then come back with, hey, you know what, I found my 60% of financing, can I get another 40%? We've seen that happen already. So there is a possibility that there is, not a possibility, there is a chance that will happen for sure. If you are sure that what you've developed is really of good quality, right? In terms of your characters, in terms of your script. So when we talk about script, we say, hey, do you have a script writer? Not, because one of the problems is always story. So usually, and we've seen this in Korea, a lot of the Korean content that you see, the animation, most of their writers are actually from Hollywood. They actually get writers from Hollywood to actually write for them. So, I mean, Hollywood meaning the animation part of Hollywood, not the, so children's content and stuff. So, you probably need to look at that if you cannot find locally. Animonsta is lucky enough they have Anas who can write really well. So, but he's working for Animonsta, right? But we need to create more of these writers, and we hope that more content can develop. I think this is also where the government is also shifting its view. Before, we've always been encouraging IP development, IP. But the thing is, when we thought that when you create IP, which is what we did with IPCC and all these things. IPCC is IP Creators Challenge. If you guys don't know, we've been doing it for the past 8 years already. And that program, we actually gives 50,000 ringgit for you to develop your idea and the trailer. So in this sense, the validation is done by the industry. Yeah. So you pitch, you get the funding, and then throughout the 6 months, you'll actually have mentors to help you finish your project. Right. We need to get that. It's almost like a little mini accelerator sort of project. But the thing is, once the idea is done, they go to the next level, right? And when they go to the next level, they also need financing. So this is where I think this development and then also production also come into play. But the point that I want to make is that at that time, when we asked the companies to create the IP, we also wanted them to create companies. Meaning, after you've created your IP, can you create your own company so that you have to hire animators, hire compositors, hire all these guys? So you want to create a company. And that actually is a burden to our ecosystem because it's still very small. So right now we're saying, hey, you know what, you IP developer, you keep being just IP developer. The guys who have the animation companies, you go to them if you need animation work. Then they see you guys can collaborate or not. I think that's where we're going to go going forward.
Thanks, Hasnul. I think because we are lack of time, just one last question. I'll focus on IP. I think two questions. Two sub questions. One is more for the government has spent a lot of money on core IP production. In a lot of cases, the IP is owned by the other party, and the local guys don't own the IP. So I just want to ask Hasnul, what if you are doing an animation startup or a game startup, how do you protect the IP, and what kind of terms do you want to put in to protect the IP so that you can maximize your benefit? I think for Anas as well as an entrepreneur, now since you have more experience in doing IP, how do you structure a deal that can maximize your IP? For example, if you want to slice one portion on merchandise and slice one portion for games, how do you go about that thinking process? But I'll ask Hasnul first, then you can talk more about that. and on this?
Very quickly, I think this platform itself, the Global IP Valuation Conference, is such a great platform for us to realize and be aware of IP rights and IP licensing. And this is where you guys can learn that, right? For animation case, even from MDEC's point of view, we actually, in a way, force the companies, whenever they under the development fund, is to allocate a certain amount for them to register their IP, right? We actually force the companies to do that. And then that's where they go to my IPO, or they go to the lawyers to actually get copyright, trademark their copyrights and these sort of things. So it's very important for you to realize that even at the start, yeah. But it may be costly for you to do trademark for the whole world. So you're gonna have to choose the places where you want to trademark. So maybe first you start in Malaysia, and then later when you have another region that you want to go to, then you trademark in that region, and you do the same. Because even trademarks, I don't know if you know, also based on classes, right? It's not just trademark of everything. There's, maybe the shoes, apparels is one class, then video games is another class, or whatever it is. So things that that you need to be aware of when you start looking at registering your IP lah. So these are on that point we're very adamant about making sure our companies do that. And also at the same time, there are programs under MDEC that actually that we do for our MSC status companies. So those who are not MSC, susah sikit kita nak ajak, because our mandate is always about our MSC companies. That we call them for dialogues and stuff like that, where we actually share the latest trends and also these views that we want to have, and we also do these things like IP valuation also.
Just a bit on the trademarking. Like you said, you don't have to trademark everything. For instance, if you're doing a game, mobile game, you probably don't need to trademark, food and beverage. Contohnya lah, you just go for some generic stuff that can become merchandise. If you can imagine it to become merchandise, then you trademark it. If you can't, like for instance, if you're making a show about girls, you probably don't need to trademark stuff that's related to like boys' watches and stuff like that, or But if you're making a animation related to that, then definitely toys would be something that you want to trademark. Chris talked, he was whispering to me if I could just talk about co-IP ownership, specifically about the story about when I was working in Las Copa and, when we were working in the Upin Ipin stuff. There's no real dispute about it. Tuan Haji Burhanuddin, the owner of Las Copa, he owns the IP, he owns the copyright of Upin Ipin. There's no doubt about that. Some people say, why don't you guys fight it? What's the point of fighting it? Because at the end of the day, if you really think about it, IP ownership is, it's important, of course, but the most important thing is you need to understand who are the people who are creating the IPs, who are the people who are creating the creative animations. You need to value that the most important thing in your organization is not so much the product. The product doesn't matter as much as the team makeup that you have. The team, the people who are doing the animation, who are writing, that's the secret sauce in your animation company, in your games company, whatever. Is the people that are doing the hands-on work. It can go with anything, even like food and beverage. You can say that your IP, your recipe is the most important. No, the person who is creating the recipes of your food, that's the most important person. That is the golden goose, so to speak. So if let's say you lose out on an IP, oh man, I should have trademarked that under my name. You could go create a new one. That's the important thing, because in an animation company, when you have the team, this all-star team, the one person who knows the business side, one person who knows the creative, one person who knows how to merge it all together in animation production, these are the people that you really, really need to value, and these are the people that are going to create IPs for the longest time. So don't worry too much about IP ownership. When you're working with another company, if you need to share the IP because you really need the funds to get the business started, go ahead. But at the same time, you need to remember that before you share an IP, you need to understand that at the early stages, nobody can tell you how your IP is worth. I've had a lot of people who say that, hey, why don't you, work with the investor, and they can have a certain share in your IP and stuff like that in your company. Nobody will ever can say how much your IP is worth until it's out in the market, until it's doing really, really well. We were very, very in a way sombong lah. We didn't want to take investors early on because we were really afraid of owning the IP with someone else, because we also didn't know how much it was worth. We wanted to make sure that we took care of it, we built it, we grew Bobo Boy to what it is now, and then only we're confident, okay, this is the level that Bobo Boy is at. So don't worry too much about how can you own the IP as much, because at the end of the day, if your team can do another one, you're gonna be, you're okay, because that's the golden goose. Just don't fire the creative team or the business people that are making it a success. You really, really value your team for creating that award-winning IP.
A very short one. I want to reaffirm what he says. I think that's a very, very valid point. And especially, I'm sure there are some startups out there. Don't be afraid of sharing your IP at the start, because at the end of the day, when you're a startup, you're trying to build your company. It's not really the IP at the moment. It's building your processes, your people within the company, those who you can trust, so that once that first IP is a success, anyways, you're sharing it anyways, that the next IP you do, you can decide to do it on your own, and you have the name to do it. Yeah, so that is important for you. You either have to decide you want your IP or you want to build your company first. And I think that's a very key point that Anas made.
Thanks, everyone. Questions? Oh.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're opening questions to the floor. If anybody would like to engage with our panel of speakers, the mic is over there.
Good afternoon.
Yep.
I have a few questions here, but I make it short.
Yeah, just one question at a time.
Yeah, one question at a time. Okay. So for the first one, is regarding the pitching center, where Hasnul mentioned about. What kind of the development that we should use or we should present during the pitching session? Is it a concept art, a concept of the whole idea about our IP, or it can be a short film, a short trailer for what is it about? Yeah.
If I am not mistaken, they probably use the same processes that MDEC has followed, which we first start out what we call lambat pitching. Lambat lah, macam joget lambat kind of thing, right? But lambat pitching is essentially the first filter for us to look at if this project should be tabled to the evaluation committee. So at this point, they just want to hear your ideas. They don't want to see any animation. They just want to see maybe some concept art, your story, synopsis, this sort of thing. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. They don't even want to see the budget yet at that time. So once you convince that panel that you should go to the next level, then at that time the pitching center will come back to you and say, hey, you know what? You have to fill in this form. This is, we need to know what your budget is. We need to know what you want to plan to do, and then only you go to the evaluation committee. So for development, it's really about ideas. You want to see some ideas, what's a synopsis. But once you go into production, that's different. When you go into production, you need to, number one, you need to ensure that you already have all the production, the scripts ready already. You need to show that you already have a existing financier that's going to come in to actually assist you. So when I talk about development, the amount of funds is a lot smaller than the production, right? So there's a smaller cap just for development, because we know how much it costs to develop certain IPs, and actually quite big lah. If it was internally my own money, I don't think we will give you that much to do it. But we are very nice to our companies, hopefully to develop the very good ideas. But once you go into production, you need to have all that ready: your scripts ready, your storyboards ready, your models ready. And you can go start doing production. Yeah.
Anyone other questions? Before, maybe let the gentleman first,
I'm a trainer by profession. I've created many board games, okay, and I've been playing these board games with thousands of people. Okay, what should be my next step? You can advise me. That's the best way to make it big or make it illegal.
So you're making board games right now.
Board game. I've been, well, 20 years ago I started with
Okay.
one, then another 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Maybe if you're because that's basically your IP, that one product that you have, or the few products that you have. If it's doing really well, then maybe you can try to market it outside of Malaysia, for instance, or in ASEAN market somewhere. Try to, I don't know, make it more global. Rename it in English or whatever, package it whatever, because you already know that it works. It's fun. It can even be like you can do the monopoly thing where they take outside licenses, and then there's a Star Wars monopoly, there's a whatever, so many different types of monopoly. So you can even take other licenses to produce the different branches, like Lego does that as well. Lego Batman, Lego Superman, but nobody can beat Lego Star Wars, for instance. That's just nuts. But at the same time, their core business is still Lego. Because, if you're interested, you can pick up Bobo Boy's license and then you can do a Bobo Boy board game. That's still, doable. So I think there's many ways for you to go to the next step. Because for us, we won't make a board game because we don't know how to make one. We're just focusing on our business.
That's an interesting question, because at the same time, we're looking into the games industry very heavily right now, MDEC. And I think, as you can see, that there are different platforms for you to be on, right? The game can be a physical, but it can also be a digital format, right? And at the end of the day, even on the digital format, it's all about the game design. So maybe what you want to do is to approach companies who are already doing mobile apps, because right now the mobile platform is probably the easiest to actually to publish on, right? Either on the Google store or on the to find somebody who's probably doing games already, that would like to transport some of your game ideas into a mobile format. And the idea is like, board games is to encourage social, right? You're playing with other people, right? So then you can do it perfectly on mobile, because it's mostly your board games are turn-based, so you don't have to be there all the time online. You can send the turn, and then somebody else can do it on the next time. You've seen that happen. They have Monopoly, Game of Life, or Hearthstone, card games, or everything. They do very well on the mobile platform. So I think there's an opportunity for you there to actually look at that. So maybe what you need to do, especially if you want to go to pitch it, because you can also pitch this to the pitching center, is to find someone who is already doing mobile apps to work with you to bring your game into the digital format. And I think that's a good opportunity for you right there.
Okay, I think you can ask them offline, I guess. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give another big round of applause to our panel. Anas Aziz from Animonsta Studios, Hasnul, Hadi, Samsudin from MDEC, and Chris Leong, our moderator. The next session here will happen in the next 10 minutes. Thank you.